Good morning.
Good morning. This is November 10th, 2024, and our topic today is Don't Be Undone by Appearances. Go to the mountaintop.
Right. And I want to start off by saying, first off, that I know we're wearing red, that we didn't become Republicans. Although we have to honor what what has occurred, and that's going to be some of our talk, is to talk about how we can easily be done in by the way things look to us and without having considered necessarily what it means in a larger picture. And so for a lot of us, there was a lot of disappointment. And I think the biggest part of it is for me is making sure that the disappointment leads me to some course of action in favor of the world working better. And I think so often what happens is we move from dissatisfaction or frustration into apathy or indifference. And it's a really, really important time for us not to be indifferent or to allow ourselves to be apathetic because that things may not have worked out exactly the way we wanted them to. And no matter who had won, it wouldn't have worked out the way we wanted it to. And because there's too many people involved for everything to go smoothly and easily the way any of us would like it to go. So we know moving into this next year that there'll be the challenges that are necessary for us to be able to make the progress that we need to make.
Exactly. I've talked to so many friends who are devastated by the results of the election. And I told Bob, I'm so glad that we're able to not have that reaction.
That's right. That's why we're moving to Canada.
Because, the truth is, I've learned many, many times, I never know what's best for me. I think I know what's best, but I never know what's best. And so, what works better for me is to always expect the best, no matter what happens, and not project what I think is a terrible thing to happen. Because I don't know. The truth is, we have two major parties, and the truth is, the party that I'm in favor of has many aspects that I'm not in favor of, but I tend to just ignore those and focus on what I like. But I think that with the coming changes, first of all, we've been told by numerous sources that the Earth is in a state of change. The vibration is changing. We're moving into the Aquarian age, if you would, if that means anything to you. But supposedly, in the next 20 years, we're coming into a period of a better, more spiritual way of living. And in order for that to happen, all of our old institutions have to pass away,
Or at least transform.
at least transform, especially our governments. And so I was starting to think about the things that I'm not happy with, even with the party that I prefer. And one of the things is this war. What do we call it? The something industrial complex, but the military industrial complex. In other words, we make all the weapons for the world, and we let them. We encourage other countries to buy them. We make a lot of money on them for our country, and even in wars that we support, like Ukraine right now, we give them the money so they can turn around and buy the weapons from the weapons manufacturers in our country, and that prospers our country. I just don't know how it happened because I was born right at the end of World War II, and I know we built up that war industry because we never wanted it to ever happen again, that we got caught in the Pearl Harbor situation where we had a country with superior military strategy and equipment destroy our whole armada of warships. And so we have built up just a huge, huge weapon industry. I don't like that. That's not what I'm for. But I've always just sort of ignored it because, oh, well, what are we going to do? So, what Bob and I do when we have a disappointment is look for the good where we can find it. Expect the good where we can find it. It's often called going to the mountaintop. And I'd like to do a screen share here to share this quote. Thank you. And it is a quote from the head of Unity, who was Charles Fillmore. And he said, mountaintop. A mountain represents an exalted state of mind where the divine plan may be perceived and unfolded, a state of spiritual realization. The high mountain to which personality carries is in our spiritual uplift of consciousness of power over mortal thought in all its earthly avenues of expression. Going up to the mountain to pray means elevating our thoughts and our aspirations to the spiritual viewpoint. So that is a wonderful quote. Oops, for what we can do.
Go up here. Okay, we're good.
It's for what we can do when we're not happy and we're afraid of what this may mean. Let's go to the mountaintop and see, could it possibly, even if some structures and functions of our present government are changed or eliminated, is it possible that could be a good thing in the long run? Let's look for the good, because then we're more likely to find it.
You know, I learn a lot from nature, and I think nature is a great teacher for us. And I remember that reading about how the wolves had been eliminated in what that park? I'm trying to think of the California park, the huge
Yellowstone.
Yellowstone. They had basically killed all the wolves because it was decided that the wolves were dangerous. The wolves were hard on cattle, and so that decision continued for a lot of years. Now, one of the things that they decided to do in the last few years, with some people objecting, was to bring back wolves. But we had a position that wolves were dangerous and bad and shouldn't be around. When they brought back the wolves, they discovered something that was really interesting. The deer normally fed by the riverbed, and because they fed by the riverbed, it was safe because there was no wolves. They had basically stripped away all of the life on both sides of the river. So when they brought back the wolves, the deer said it's not so safe to eat here all of the time. We're going to have to kind of travel around. And you go back a year later, and the entire river is filled with flowers and plants and trees, and beavers have now settled and they have created dams. They have literally changed the landscape, and they changed it for the good. So on the one hand, we take positions very often that we believe to be the highest and the best, and we act on those, and then we discover later that they were the highest and the best for the moment, but not for the long haul, and we need to change our mind. So part of what we're really talking about today is the ability that we have to be adaptable, to adapt to a situation without judgment, without pouting, without anger, without trying to get even, to adapt to the situation and say, what's the best I can do for the highest and the best? What can I do? What can I do individually? And as Ernest Holmes talks about, Ernest Holmes says very, very confidently that the way you change the world is one person at a time, that you don't change the world through legislation unless the legislation is done with individuals who all agree at one time. And so that's what we have to do.
So the major reason that the voters gave for voting the way they did is they wanted more abundance in their lives. And so I wanted to share some quotes about what abundance is anyway. And Ernest Holmes said this in his book called This Thing Called You. He said, the will of God for you is that of a boundless life flowing through you. It's the will of joy, of success, of happiness, of peace, of abundance. It's the will of the kingdom of heaven, not absent from this earth, but imperfectly seen. So this will of the kingdom of heaven, we need to remember that, is not absent from this earth, but is imperfectly seen. So if we could shift our viewpoint in this way and continue to expect the good and quit condemning what has happened, I think that it's best for all of our mental health and emotional health. And because I have talked to people who are so upset they can hardly stand themselves
Mhm.
or anybody else right now. And it's it's not helpful. It's not helpful for anyone. And it's certainly not helpful for their own lives. So we don't always get what we want. Guess what?
Well,
It's nothing new.
the death of an idea or the death of
A dream,
something, a
perhaps.
dream or something we hold close, it can be expected that we're going to do some grieving. And so grieving is a natural part of dealing with loss. But grieving also doesn't mean that we don't live any longer. It doesn't mean that we stop living. The hardest thing to do through grief is to continue to choose to live each day as fully as you can. And so the death of anything can steal your life, or it can engender a deeper look at your life and asking what is there that I can do? What is next for me? And so not quitting is really, really important, and not pouting and not having a tantrum that we make up a story about.
Speaking of not quitting, one of the things that Trump did is campaign for 8 years. We've never had a candidate campaign for 8 years.
Really.
And so that's really interesting. I asked myself, well, what if Kamala decided to campaign for the next 4 years? Not everybody's got their own private jet and things like that, and ways of making money where they can continue to do that.
Yeah.
But that's something that has not been mentioned in this win. Yeah.
So I want to shift away from the politics and talk about it in a little different way. What is it that if you were to change it in your own perspective, in your own way of living, what is it that if you were to change that or it were to improve, would improve your life? What is it that you can do in your spiritual life that if you did more of that or you gave it greater focus would be more transformative? I think for a lot of us, a lot of the time, our spirituality is kind of like a fire engine. It's in the fire station, and we pull it out whenever we need it. And unfortunately, we need really to continue to develop our spirituality when there isn't a fire and when there's nothing to put out, but something to add to our life. And so this is a time where we can be reactive on the one hand, or it's a time when we can choose to be pro quality of life.
Exactly. And I've got another quote because I really like this. I think this is, I know that the first quote is essentially true, that God is for us and for our abundance and all of that. And then we have to figure out the mindset to attract all of that to us. And I think this is the mindset. This is ancient wisdom. It comes from Lao Tzu. So we're talking about thousands of years ago in China. So he said, be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. And I think that is so true. We get focused on what we don't have, what we want more of, and then you start thinking about what you don't want. So you're creating more of what you don't want because what you think about and focus on, give your attention to is what you're creating.
Right.
So you can create more abundance in your life by being appreciative of what you have.
And one of the problems with wanting something and even getting something is that the wanting often leads to an idea that my life will be better or I will be better once I have that.
Or I'll be happy once I
Yeah,
have
well,
that. That's a big mistake.
better life through whatever it is. And so the problem is that it does seem to be true for an hour or for a day or for a month or maybe even for a year. But after a while, we have been seduced into believing that joy comes from the stuff we have rather than joy comes from within. We were watching a kind of funny and I don't think really great movie last night, The
No.
Lost Island, and we needed some light entertainment. But one of the whole movie was founded on this idea that there was a ruby crown of fire that was hugely important and worth fighting for, valuable, and would change and transform anybody who had it. So we have the bad guy trying to get this, of course, and they finally get to the tomb and they find that it isn't a crown in the physical world, it's a crown of shells.
Red shells.
Red shells that these lovers gave
Ruby
to
red.
each other. And the whole notion behind it was that the love that they had was the crown jewel. It was not a jewel per se. And I think that was very meaningful for me because I think so often we actually forget that the crown jewel is consciousness, not that thing we put on our head or the car that we drive or the house that we live in or the person that we spend our time with. That crown jewel is consciousness.
Exactly. And so um, it's natural that some of us would prefer a different result, but you just can't stay there and hang out there.
No.
You look for the seed of equivalent benefit.
Oh, I like that.
That's something Ernest Holmes said that
Would you say more about that?
I will, that anything that bad happens, you label as bad that happens to you, there is a seed of the equal amount of good that comes up for it. If you look for it, if you look for it, it can be a shift in your attitude. It can be, it can be any number of things. Um, I want to share something that happened to us recently, but we've got a number of things that I could label bad that happened to us. One is when I had an accident, fell in my condo and broke my shoulder. It's been very painful. It's a very long recovery, and I feel like I've been semi-conscious a couple of months. But you know what it did for me when I looked for, well, what's good can come from this, or what good did this do? Well, it caused everything else in my life to stop, including a lot of irritating work I was doing for my condo association. And I felt like, I had to do a good job and I was going to do the best job. And so I was doing it all the time. And it immediately came to a halt. And guess what? Other people stepped up and did those things
Little
because
bit
they had to,
Yeah.
and they can. And I'm going to continue letting them because the seed of equivalent benefit for me was that I don't have to do that. I can spend my time doing what I want to do for me. Um, it was a pleasure and a privilege to do things that helped our building, but I don't have to spend my life doing that. So that is a seed of equivalent benefit. And there's always one. There's always at least one if you will look for it and accept it. Doesn't mean that I enjoyed it or I wanted it to happen or I would like it to happen again. No, once is enough, please. And so, but for every little thing
Yeah.
that we've gone through, there is a seed, maybe just a seed, just a start of something better coming out of this.
Well, quite literally, you see this when a forest burns. On the one hand, you lose
Yes.
an inventory of trees that you can't imagine having lost. At the same time, the light now can touch the ground and new seedlings begin, and another generation of trees is born. And not only is another generation of trees born, but the trees that survived actually, we now know, feed the saplings, the new trees. They share their benefits.
And not only that, in California, in certain areas, they call it the chaparral, that uh, the fire releases the seeds
Oh, yeah, yeah.
to grow. And only fire will do that.
That's an
Isn't that?
interesting metaphor, though.
Yeah.
Think about that. Is it whenever there's a fire in consciousness, is it delivering a new path? Is it opening a new way for you? Is it? And a lot of the things that we've accomplished in our lives, we've accomplished because something didn't work. We needed to overcome most of the diseases that we have managed to get uh, a handle on dealing with have been beyond our abilities for a very long time. And we struggled and came up with a solution to many diseases and why we're living as long as we're living. But my point is that adversity does not mean that we should feel bad. It means that this is the condition that we need to walk through. We need to figure out how to deal with it. I want to mention one more thing about grieving because I think for a lot of people, the grieving process will continue. And for some of us at our age, grieving seems to be a chapter in our life because we lose people that we care about, and we knew what that was going to happen. You're never prepared for it, and so grieving comes in waves. We know that, and over the long period of time as we grieve, what we're going to notice is the waves are not as high. They don't last as long, and they're not as intense. They don't not occur. There'll always be waves of grief that come with losses that we've experienced. I think over time, we can learn from those waves. We can learn more about ourselves, and we can learn more about what we have loved and who we have cared about through the grief and through the resolution. But when I say, grieving is something that we're going to experience, I don't mean by any stretch that it's gone in a day or a month or a year or even a lifetime. But I think, again, and my mantra for daily living is whatever it is I don't like, I want it to happen less often for shorter periods with less intensity. And that starts with my mood. It starts with my day. But whatever it is I'm having a trouble with, the mission is, can I shorten it? Can I have it be less intense? Can I use my head rather than just react?
Can I change my thinking?
Yeah,
When you say use your head, you're saying, can I change my
yeah,
thinking?
exactly. But we have to see if we can bring it to a stop, whatever the reaction is. Is if grieving is a something we react to. And if we can monitor our reaction and say, what am I doing? Is it supporting the grief or is it supporting the resolution? Is it supporting coming together with what I need to learn? And this has been an interesting couple of years with both things that have come to us and things that have left us.
Yes, exactly. And what you are saying to yourself is really what is causing your mood, your attitude, and I so firmly know that life continues after death in a much, by the way, happier way, with more love, with more peace, with more joy. And those on the other side say they're right here. They're right here, still with us, and I do believe that. And so, um, even though we can grieve our loss when someone we loved, we can't be around them physically anymore, we can still know that they're there and that we will be joined with them eventually. So, it's best to remember the good times, to remember
Mhm.
um, the love, remember how much you have enjoyed them.
So see if you can this week to balance the good with what you consider to be the bad, the positive with what you consider to be the negative.
How do they balance it? What do you mean?
Give more attention to, give more thought to what could be a positive here. And if I can't make a positive out of this
Mhm.
negative, which I may not be able to do, is there something else I can give my attention to that is positive?
To look for the seed of equivalent benefit.
Oh, sure. Say it efficiently and effectively. That is really beautiful. Yeah, exactly. But in our daily living, that's really is what survival looks like. And what we now
Yes.
know, with a lot of research that's been done over a long period of time, is that the species that live the longest have a couple of things in common. Which one is that they are adaptable, and two is they're friendly. And friendliness and adaptability turn out to be two of your greatest strengths, as opposed to being able to be a heavy duty warrior, or be stronger than everyone else. And I think a good example of that is, and I've known a number of football players whose claim to fame for a very long time was their prowess on the field. And almost all of them that I know in their later years have had huge problems with joints and problems with the way their body was abused. And so being strong and being tough and being a fighter has its advantages, but that does not include longevity. And so if we want to be around for a long time and we want to make a difference in the world, we need to be adaptable. We need to be friendly. We need to be open and curious. And those are all the qualities that seem to have been the strongest qualities for sustaining.
And go to the mountaintop.
Yeah,
Go to the
if
mountaintop.
there's a tram that takes you up, that's really great. You have to hike. Well, I always think it's funny. There's a stairway to heaven and a highway to hell. What does that say? The stairway up to, yeah, well, how many more steps is, I don't know. We've got to keep climbing, but yeah, the music certainly does tell us something about what we think about the world. So I think we've about run out of time, but what we are going to do is just spend a minute talking about how to support us here if you'd like to do that. If you want to support our ministry, there's a simple way that you can do that, and that is to go to our website, and Joe's bringing it up right now,
Very good.
and donate. Donate as much as you feel comfortable with, and what we know is that as you share, you are shared with. As you give, you are given to. And so just make that cycle, continue that cycle, support that cycle. If there's lack in your life, then imagine abundance and share whatever you can to get that moved forward.
Yeah, especially because when you give to the source of your spiritual inspiration, that is how you get prosperity moving in your life. You give money away. And what better source than to the source of your spiritual inspiration? So the way you support us is going to our website, cslpalmbeaches.org, and going to this button that says ways to donate. And then it will show you how you can do that. So we thank you, and we know many of you do that on a regular basis,
Yeah, we
and we
appreciate it.
appreciate it. So let's say our affirmation about that: as we give, we do receive. My investment today is made with the full realization that God is the source of my supply and returns it to me, enriched and multiplied.
Stop share here.
Thank you.
Okay, and then stop recording.
That's down here where I can't see. Oh, no. Cancel. Phew,
Did you stop recording?
no. Stop.